To start this second Lesson 13 video, I want to share two portfolio stories. First, one of our alums emailed me a few months after she graduated. She wrote, "I didn't use my portfolio at all in my job search." I gasped and thought, oh no, especially since we require all of our undergraduate students and master's students to develop, publish, and present a professional portfolio. But then she continued by talking about how the process of putting together her portfolio, selecting pieces, writing annotations, thinking about her skills and how to best represent them, helped her get comfortable talking about her work and her skills. So although she didn't use the portfolio as artifact in her job search, she definitely used the portfolio as part of her process. A second student emailed me right after graduation, and she wrote, "I just accepted a job. In one of my first interviews, the editorial manager could not get over how impressive my website was. She'd even printed out portions of it and wanted to discuss it with me. In my following interview, the interviewer could not have been more pleased with my website. She could barely stop talking about it. I'd included several projects from college to showcase the various skills I'd picked up: newspaper, magazine design, coding, syntax, logo design, copy editing, and I also included some published clips. She said it was so impressive to see a copy editor spend so much time on a portfolio and to demonstrate how well-rounded I was. They offered me the job the next day." So why portfolios? Here's why. They help you organize your work, academic and professional. They provide a living, breathing record of your work, and they can be incredibly helpful, as you saw through these two stories about these alums on their job search and interviewing process. I talked a bit in our first Lesson 13 video about how your resume generally tells people what you've done and can do in titles and bullet points. Your portfolio is a place to show people what you can do. It's one thing to say something like, "I'm creative." It's another thing entirely to offer evidence. For instance, these are two portfolio pieces, one a typography spread and the second a direct mail postcard. Saying you're a good communicator doesn't tell me much, but offering examples of different documents you produced and designed that do different types of work for different audiences shows me you're a good communicator. Saying you can design documents doesn't tell me much. Showing me you can design reports, articles, and other pieces says a lot more about you. So let's talk about identifying material and drafting annotations for your portfolios. As for selecting material, hopefully you're in the habit of saving everything. Save drafts, save pieces, save bits, save blurbs. You never know when the work might come in handy and serve well in your portfolio. And what's especially exciting, I think, about portfolios is that you can show process. You can include drafts. For instance, students in our program who are situating themselves to work in editing and publishing will often include a raw document, a version of the document, usually in PDF form, with their handwritten changes indicated, showing their copy editing marks, then another version in Word with track changes on, and then the final piece so we can see their process. We can see them copy editing. A big consideration, though, to think about is what you can save. For instance, if you have an internship, you're working a part-time job, you're freelancing, be sure to ask your boss or your clients whether or not you can save a piece and include it in your portfolio. Some of the work might include proprietary information that they don't want you to publicly present. How you situate the work in your portfolio is often more important than the work itself. You shouldn't just plunk pieces into your portfolio. Instead, you should carefully contextualize them. Each piece should be accompanied by an annotation. The annotation is going to tell your portfolio readers or viewers how to consider your work. Annotations should be relatively brief, maybe just a couple of sentences. Important information an annotation provides is some discussion of the context the work was produced in, what your role was, what strategies or approaches you applied or tools you used, and what the outcome was. So for instance, you might include a screen capture of a Facebook campaign you created and launched. Okay, that's evidence of social media writing. But if you can include the screen capture along with an annotation that discusses why the campaign was launched, how you approached researching and creating it, and what the effects were, maybe more Facebook likes, more cross posts, more followers across your organization's social media. That says a lot more about the piece and your skills. We're going to look at some portfolio work in the context of portfolios. But I want to offer a couple of examples of annotations that do some of this important work here. Talking about the circumstances in the context, describing the role or responsibilities, talking about strategies, techniques, and tools, discussing outcomes and products, and then, if appropriate for the portfolio, talking a little bit about outcomes. What did I learn and what reflects this? This is the preface to a set of 3 graphics a professional writer created to accompany feature articles for an online MSU publication, The Big Green. The portfolio writer notes, these pieces were designed to accompany feature articles from monthly e-zine. I received the text from the editor, along with a description of the story, and created an appropriate graphic. I primarily used Adobe Photoshop and Illustrator. So this person tells us she's capable of interpreting a textual story and choosing and shaping appropriate graphics to accompany the story. She also tells us and shows us she's proficient in Photoshop and Illustrator. This writer included in her portfolio a beautiful little storybook she pursued as a personal project. Her annotation explains that the piece is a print booklet for which she took lyrics from one of her favorite songs, shot photos to accompany the lyrics, and created a short booklet. She says, I took photos, directed photo shoots, and selected images that best complemented the lyrics. The photos exemplify my skills in Adobe Photoshop, and the overall layout demonstrates my proficiency in document design. This designer included a piece that she created in a class, but you'll notice she doesn't mention it's a class project. In part because she was using her portfolio to situate herself professionally, saying things like, in a class and my professor made us, and we were required. That puts the emphasis on the class and her as a student rather than as a professor. So let's toggle over to wireframing and building your portfolio. For our purposes, wireframing is creating a mock-up of what you want your portfolio to look like. And this is something you can work on as you're selecting pieces to include in your portfolio and drafting your annotations and thinking about your overall professional identity. Here's a pretty basic handwritten wireframe. Here's a wireframe a person created with stickies so he could easily move around aspects of his site as he was rethinking the navigation and the overall design. Here's a more robust wireframe created with an online tool called Balsamic. Once you've created a wireframe and you've adjusted it and tweaked it, and you have a strong sense of what you're going to do and how you're going to lay out and design your portfolio, you can start building. And you guys have a range of options. You might build from scratch using a web development tool like Adobe Dreamweaver. I usually only recommend this method to students who want to be full-time professional web developers. They need to show their HTML, CSS, XML, JavaScript, and other code-based skills in their portfolio. I think a better method for many of us is to use a tool like Squarespace or Weebly. These provide a web template in a kind of drag and drop interface where what you see is what you get. You can dig into the code and work with the HTML, but otherwise you can build your portfolio in a visual interface. And they have some really robust templates. So you can start with a template and then modify it so it suits your portfolio specs. Before you all spend some time digging into and looking at portfolios, I thought we'd look at a couple together. First, we'll look at Too Many Commas, the portfolio of Alyssa Eglin. If we head into her portfolio area, we see a brief professional bio and a discussion of her work. My editing and writing background includes magazines, nonfiction books, novels, newspapers, multimedia law, advertising, online publications, and graphic design. And she includes more specific detail of her work. If we head into the editing portion of her portfolio, we can see some of the companies and publications she's worked with and worked for. However, that's about as deep as we can get. If we click on a company name, for instance, Time, we get a brief blurb, but there's no access to sample work. Let's focus on design, given that this is a document design class. Alyssa anchors her identity with the proverbial red pen and the caption, Too Many Commas. Her main page picture shows a photo of herself with punctuation raining down on her, protecting yourself with what may be a style guide. A red typewriter anchors her portfolio, an interesting choice given that this is a digital portfolio. Other visual material across the portfolio includes mainly thumbnails of her work. And here's a second example. This is a portfolio of Kate McAlpine, a science communicator. Her site is categorized into articles, web and outreach, science wrap, resume, and personal statement. If we head into, for instance, the science wrap area, we see a brief intro and then we can view some of Kate's YouTube pieces. You can spend more time in Kate's portfolio if you like, but I want to pause and talk a bit about the design. Kate adopted the science communicator identity to shape her portfolio, and I think she uses it brilliantly. She has the pen in a beaker and creates a play on the periodic table in her navigation. And importantly, she deploys this identity throughout her portfolio, consistently using the pen in the beaker and the periodic table icons for her navigation. We've talked all semester about how repetition is a key design element, and Kate deploys it really well here. Okay, we've covered a lot and we've covered it quickly. I think our next best step is to look at some portfolios of working professional writers to analyze some of the moves they've made and consider how their portfolios represent their professional identities. You'll find after this video on NYU classes a page with a set of links to different portfolio sites, along with a couple of prompts to consider. This work, that is, analyzing some people's portfolio contents and design, will help you prep for one of this week's activities, a forum post, and will help you with part of your final project work, which is to select and review the portfolios of 3 other professional writers.